Here at Aliens Explored, we enjoy engaging with our audience, and this week we will be discussing a question raised by Michelle. Michelle has opened a whole can of worms by asking us if we think that extraterrestrials might be time travellers. Join us on Aliens Explored as we explore the many facets of interdimensional travel. This episode is dedicated to our Explorer of the Week, Israel, who supports our podcast through our Patreon. Check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Aliens Explored and find a tier that is right for you.
Aliens Explored is a weekly podcast exploring famous and obscure cases of UFO sightings, alien abductions and other strange events from both a believing and a sceptical perspective whilst keeping an open mind. I'm Stu Jackson, a professional actor and amateur ufologist with a particular interest in the crop circle phenomenon. I'll be debating that otherworldly visitations are real. The truth is out there.
And I'm Neil Kelly. I'm a professional actor as well and used to work for the military as an intelligence analyst. I'll be arguing from a more doubtful point of view. I mean, it's all a bit far-fetched, isn't it?
Welcome back, listeners, to Aliens Explored, your weekly podcast where we look at all things UFO, UAP, ET, EBE, everything else kind of to do with ufology, really. I am one of your hosts, Stu Jackson.
And I'm your other host, Neil Kelly, and I don't know what half those things are. What's an EBE?
EBE, extra-terrestrial biological entity. Or extra-biological... No.
It must be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Extraterrestrial biological entity.
So the initials BE in Britain usually stand for British Empire, Order of the British Empire, Commander of the British Empire, Member of the British Empire, some kind of meaningless...
Extraterrestrial of the British Empire, yes. And mentioning the British Empire, of course, we've got a king now.
We have.
We have got a king. That's just happened.
Yes.
But there we go.
And we are in a state of national mourning, so we shouldn't be sounding so cheerful. But yes, we are in a state of enforced mourning. The
life
tier
goes on.
The tier police will be coming around soon to make sure we shed the requisite number of tears.
Yeah, you literally can't turn on the TV at the moment and get away from it.
No,
but. Hey ho! We had a very nice comment on our Discord, on our Patreon Discord server, actually from our friend Israel, saying condolences to those in the UK, Commonwealth, on the passing of Queen Elizabeth. I'm certain there is a range of sentiment on the matter. Oh, you'd better believe that.
Quite a range, yes.
But that it represents the end of an era is putting it mildly, it says Israel. And that's a nice, do you know what, that's a nice sentiment. And I think because I don't want us to get too far into this, because you and I, Neil, we have some strong opinions, as I'm sure many people
Well, we
know.
have the kinds of opinions that people are currently getting arrested for displaying publicly. So, you know.
Yes. But do you know what? Yeah, end of an era. I think that's a valid comment, and it's hard to argue with that one, isn't it?
I would have thought, our energy bills quadrupling was more will be felt more by people than a change of face in the palace.
I'd have thought 400 people a week still dying of COVID would have been more newsworthy, but it is what it is. And let's draw a line very quickly under there, because that's not what we're here to talk about at all.
We're here to talk about something other than the death of the Queen.
There is actually, very quickly, there is a related thing to ufology, because many people theorise that the royal family are in fact aliens, reptilian aliens in disguise. Maybe that's something we'll cover on a future episode. Perhaps this isn't the right moment.
Maybe we should do an episode around John Carpenter's They Live movie, but the suggestion that all the higher ups, the oligarchs and politicians are actually alien invaders, and they're subjugating us secretly. Yeah,
I know you mentioned that movie many, many times on the episode, and you've got me to watch it, and yeah, it's a good movie. Definitely one we can recommend for our listeners. Speaking of our listeners, now, this was a long, long time ago, so apologies for us only just getting round to doing this. But our listener, Michelle, who contacts us from time to time, got in touch through Facebook and wanted us to speculate on whether or not UFOs could actually be time travelers.
That's a good question, Michelle. I hope Michelle is still a listener. And
sure
she will get to hear our addressing this question. It's a very good question. And I'm going to come down and say yes.
They are?
Yes, they are time travelers. And because that kind of fits into my more general theory that explains everything paranormal and extraterrestrial, which is addressing our own insubstantiality, that we are made up of energy. The world around us is energy vibrating at a certain frequency, and time isn't linear. Time, we experience it in a linear fashion, cause and effect, one thing follows another. But according to Professor Stephen Hawking, that's not actually how it works. And it is about interdimensional travel. And, I do believe if you see a ghost, for instance, it's because where you are, the frequency has been disrupted. Like if you're on a long car journey and you've got an AM radio tuned, as you drive further away from the source of the radio, it'll start getting interfered with by other radio stations that are nearby or coming into range. And that's where you get that you're in a kind of haunted area where one frequency is being interrupted by another. And I think that's also largely an explanation for UFOs, that we not only see things that are in our past, like an Edwardian or Victorian gentleman walking through a wall because that wall doesn't exist in his world, but also things from the future, which will be advanced craft flying through our skies.
Wow.
That's my general theory. That's my general theory. So Michelle, yes, I'm saying yes.
Right. So, I mean, that's, yeah, wow. I don't know where to go from it. So I'm sure our friends at Central Utah Paranormal will have some thoughts on what you say about ghosts. That's quite interesting.
Look forward to hearing your take on that, Ben.
Definitely. And what I'm most blown away by is when we started this podcast, of course, you were coming at things from a very much look, there's got to be a terrestrial, logical, non-supernatural, non-paranormal explanation for most things. Which I believe that is. Well, is it?
Yeah.
Some people would. What it sounds like you're saying is that there are definitely craft visiting the planet that defy current understanding.
Not necessarily visiting the planet, that they're actually living in their own dimension, but for some reason the frequency of our reality has been disrupted, for instance, by by someone splitting an atom and setting off a nuclear explosion. That disrupts the frequency, and that's when we start seeing things in other dimensions, and that's why you see lots of UFOs over a nuclear test site.
I'm wondering if I've crossed over into another dimension where I'm supposed to be the skeptic.
But what Michelle is suggesting is that there are beings in Wonder who have learned how to travel between dimensions.
My understanding of what Michelle was asking is basically, are they human time travelers? Are they us from the future coming back rather than coming from another planet?
I think if you have an infinite number of universes, multiverses, that kind of occupy what we understand as the same physical space, then there's ourselves, but there's also perhaps versions of us that have evolved in different ways, inhabiting other dimensions. Or, that they are in some kind of more advanced society where their bodies have actually changed to adapt to that society.
I remember seeing a program many years ago. I was quite young at the time, so I mean, gosh, I must be looking at 35 plus years ago. But I do remember watching a program that was basically predicting our evolution as it is continuing at the moment, as it's progressing at the moment. So, for example, our jaw is receding, our cranial size is enlarging, our brains are getting bigger, basically, as we go along. Our hair, I mean, that you and I are quite evolved here, Neil, because apparently we're, as human beings, we are losing the need for hair. Because we clothe ourselves, we live in structures, we don't need to be as hairy because we're not exposed to the elements. So it's all this kind of thing. Our physical strength is diminishing. Our legs are getting shorter. Our torsos are getting longer. Our arms are getting longer. And do you know what? They showed like this, here's what we think we'll look like in, 500,000 years or a million years or whatever. And it looked very, very much like the grey type alien.
Yeah.
So I can certainly see that as essential.
That could be a long... I mean, at the moment, we're not really that much different from people 1,000 or 2,000 years ago. We're still capable of the same physical strength or building up even greater physical strength because we understand our bodies better. We have access to greater energy, protein. That's why athletes.
Yes,
that's why athletes get faster and faster. That someone who might have been an Olympic champion in the 1920s wouldn't even qualify for the Olympics now.
Well, Roger Bannister instantly comes to mind, breaking the 3-minute mile now.
4 minute, yeah.
A 4-minute mile, even now. I do apologise. I mean, now that's not... It's not that big of a deal to do a 4-minute mile.
Yeah, I think now, if you can't do that, you wouldn't be entered for that race in the Olympics. You're not up to standard.
But no, amateurs will do that. So, yes. Also, there's the advances in like clothing and footwear and things like that. All helps as well. But you're absolutely right. It's our intellectual understanding of what happens and foods and all the rest of it. But yeah, you look back to Neanderthal man and had to be physically stronger because was doing much more physical work than we do, with exception to obviously some very physically demanding jobs, perhaps. So I can see the evolutionary thing happening. So let's take the dimensional thing off the table just for the purposes of this, because I think that can get possibly a little bit in depth. I've been having a look at whether or not time travel is actually a possibility.
Stephen Hawking said that it was. He said you could build a time machine, but you wouldn't be able to go back in time. You wouldn't be able to go back to a time before that machine was built. So if you built the machine 10 years from now, you'd be able to go back to when that machine was built. That's theoretically possible. And the application of that would be if we developed interstellar space travel, if you went on, say, a 1-year space journey, you would come back many years in the future because you've been traveling at the speed of light. I don't fully understand how that works, but the idea of this time machine is that you would actually be able to, if you went on a very long journey, several years, you would be able to come back and then go back in time so that the people who sent you on this journey would still be alive when you got back.
Yes, so it's into Einstein's general theory of relativity. The closer you get to the speed of light, the slower time moves for you as the person traveling. Now, do you know what? And it's also related to gravity as well. The further you are from gravity, the faster time moves for you. Now, this actually has very, very... I was quite impressed to learn all this.
Yeah.
This has been proven. So they've obviously synchronized clocks as an experiment, put one on a high-speed plane, sent it around the world in the same direction that the Earth orbits. When it landed again, the one that was in the plane was slightly behind the one that was left on the ground.
Wow.
So that's a real thing. But this, do you know, we have time travel applications with us on a daily basis. You use sat-nav, don't you, Neil?
I do.
Do you know they have to allow for time travel?
Do they?
They do. So because they're moving very, very fast around the world, and it's about 14,000 kilometers an hour, the satellites. Not your sat nav, although I've seen how you drive.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the satellites are moving at 14,000 kilometers an hour around
Just
the
to
Earth.
maintain a geostationary position.
Just to maintain that position. On top of that, they are so far removed. I think it's about 9,000 kilometers up.
Right.
Not 100. No, sorry. They're orbiting at 20,000 kilometers above the surface. So the fact that they're moving around slows down their internal clocks ever so slightly. The fact that they're so far up speeds up their internal clocks, but by a slightly larger fraction of a second than it's slowed down.
Okay.
So they have to, and all the maths is really complex, but part of their programming is to allow for that difference. Otherwise, your sat-nav, first of all, wouldn't know where it is in relation to the Earth, and it'd be telling you were miles from home, but it wouldn't know where you are on the map either. It'd be out, and it would be out in terms of miles.
Wow.
You look at how precise that is. So the maths relating to Einstein's theory of relativity and time travel, we have it in our phones, because phones have GPS now. I'm saying that like it's a new thing, but yeah.
The most complicated thing.
So time travel's real.
The most complicated thing I knew about time, relative speeds and things. I know that in most cars, they were, I'm not sure if they still are, but they were calibrated slightly high, speedometers, or I think Americans call them tachometers. So that if your tachometer is showing 70 miles an hour, you're probably only doing about 66 miles per hour.
Yes.
So that if you exceed the speed limit, you know, if you get caught speeding in a 70 mile an hour limit, your tacho was showing 80 miles an hour. You were probably actually going much faster than that. So, but of course, with a sat nav, it has to show the exact speed you're moving at. Otherwise, it would lose you.
It's a massive variable, the speed of your car compared to your speedometer, because it depends on how much tread you've got on your tyre. Because if you've got brand new tyres on your car, your speed will show us faster than what it actually is, because your wheels are having to turn that bit more.
And also, if you're just looking at a flat map that's two-dimensional and it's showing how you're moving, if you're going up a steep hill or down a steep hill, it's going to show you actually moving very little distance on a two-dimensional map, but you're actually travelling further because you're moving in a third dimension, upwards or downwards.
Yes, but a speedometer works on rotations of the wheel. So
yes.
It assumes that the wheel is a fixed size. Yeah. So going up or down a hill wouldn't make any difference. But to a satellite looking directly down, without allowing for that, yes, that would see you as moving at a different speed.
Yeah, it's showing. It seemed you look like you're moving slower on the map, but actually you're moving there's just more road because you're travelling across a hypotenuse. Here's another idea about time, which I heard the other day. What if everything is what it seems? So, for
You're going to have
instance,
to run that one past me a bit more detail.
we generally assume that everything is what it seems to us to be. But what if, for instance, suppose when you're travelling to work, that half an hour on the train seems to go by very quickly because you're not looking forward to your destination. When you're travelling home again and you're eager to get home, that half an hour seems to last much longer. But what if that's because it actually is much longer in some other way that we can't comprehend?
Yes, the perception of time.
Versus the actuality of it. Yeah. I mean, I know that Einstein said, he said, if you spend an hour talking to a nice, I think he said a pretty girl or something, probably not the best way to phrase it these days. He said, if you spend an hour chatting to a pretty girl, it can seem like a minute. If you spend a minute sitting on a hot oven, that can seem like an hour. So that's relativity.
Yeah. That makes sense to me. Einstein certainly spent a lot of time talking to pretty girls. So he would definitely know on that. Okay, so bringing this back round, I mean, we've talked about some theory of relativity and time travel that is actually in existence. Of course, that's a long way away from being able to hop into a machine and pop to a different time. And I get that, which is what we're talking about. But so, given that disparity, if indeed what we're perceiving as aliens, UFOs, UAPs, flying saucers, call them what you will, if they are humans from the future coming back, just how far into the future do we think they would be?
Well, Simon Greer was talking in terms of tens or hundreds of thousands of years, wasn't he? These advanced civilizations.
Stephen Greer.
What did I say?
Simon.
Dr. Stephen Greer. My apologies, Dr. Stephen. Dr. Stephen, not your brother Simon. Dr. Stephen Greer said, possibly hundreds of thousands of, which is why I get sceptical when I hear that the US military have managed to shoot one down. You know, it will be like it'll be like a bunch of natives from somewhere in Micronesia jumping into their war canoes and taking down a Trident submarine or something. You know,
yes, except I mean, I would say it's not quite the same. I would say, I mean, our weaponry is pretty destructive. You know, we have armor-piercing bullets and shells and things like that. So,
but I'm sure medieval people with their cannons and siege catapults thought their weaponry was pretty destructive because they had no concept of what was possible.
Well, yeah. Do you know what? Okay. I would say rather than, you know, someone from Micronesia taking down a Trident submarine with a catapult, I would say it's more like someone from medieval times taking out a car with a trebuchet. Now that's a bit more. Okay. You can see that.
That's a bit close. Yeah, you can see that.
Yeah, there you go.
It's moving. It's moving in a dimension that they can relate to, and
I mean, it's difficult for them because the car can swerve, it can avoid it, but theoretically, you know, if you fire enough trebuchets at a car, then it's going to happen. I mean, okay. So Dr. Stephen Greer says tens of thousands. I think way further, personally.
When you think how
this is the case,
when you think how little we've evolved, I mean, when was Homo erectus? When were Neanderthals around? I mean, Neanderthals were hugely successful. They didn't damage the ecology of our planet. They lived on it for 1 million years peacefully and in harmony with their environment. They weren't top of the food chain, and then suddenly, globally, we evolved into Homo sapiens with much bigger brains, and
we seeded by another species.
Well, that's the mystery, isn't it? Because even when they discovered these lost tribes in Papua New Guinea or the depths of the Amazon, they're Homo sapiens. There are literally no Neanderthals left. I mean, maybe a Bigfoot or the Yeti or.
I mean, it's not quite the same as the Galapagos, so they're not completely isolated in that regard. But I do get what you're saying there. But I think personally, I mean, you just said Neanderthal was around for million years or whatever,
and then
I
went
think
pretty
we are
quickly.
looking literally millions of years into the future.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe a million, maybe 1.5 million. Who knows?
Mm.
But I think, if we're looking at that level of both physical evolution and technological evolution, you've also got to the concept that if they are, we'd have to ask why these time travelers were coming back. And the only logical reason I can think of is for anthropological reasons, which would make them as far removed from us as we are from single cell amoebas, basically.
Yeah. But do you think, I mean, there seems to be this, I mean, the people who tend to deal with UFOs tend to be the military because they're concerned about protecting their airspace. And of course, the military have a particular mindset that they see everything as a threat because that's kind of their job, to a man with a hammer.
Yes.
Yeah, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. To a man who's responsible for the air defense of the United States, anything that's in the air that he hasn't allowed to be in the air is a threat. But there is kind of the assumption that if beings from another world, from a more advanced civilization, arrived here, they would behave in exactly the same way as Europeans behaved when they arrived in Africa and Asia and the Americas. That, i.e., they'll wipe us out. They'll enslave us. And if you watch They Live, that's exactly what they've done in a more subtle way. They've done it by creating these corporations to make us into slaves.
I'm going to dispute that. So there's this theory that that every civilization, every intelligent civilization, will reach a point of evolution where their ability to destroy themselves is greater than their wisdom, basically. There's a lot of people theorizing that's where we are at the moment, and I can definitely see that. Now, for a species to evolve kind of way past where we are, they would have to have gained a lot of wisdom and a lot of, to get through that, basically.
Yeah.
They'd have to be wise, compassionate, understanding, empathic, or empathetic, rather. So, I don't know. I think if they're evolved enough technologically, let alone the physical evolution, but if they're evolved technologically enough, no, they'd know not to enslave. They'd know not to corrupt, and even Star Trek talks about the Prime Directive, non-interference with lesser developed species. So even we, at our level of development, know that that's not the way to go.
No. But I suppose we tend to project and we think, well, yeah, if we had that technology, if we could go to another planet where there were less advanced beings, yeah, of course we'd make them work for us.
Well, we look at history,
or we'd eat them.
We'd eat them. Yeah,
well, that's what we do with lesser beings on our own planet, don't we? That's what we do with cows and rabbits and goats.
Yeah. You're not wrong. So, yeah, but the idea that you've got some being that's evolved like millions of years ahead of us. No, I think they'd be way beyond that level.
Or maybe they come to worship us in that way that we worship our cats, and obviously obey them. And
I think there's a big difference there, in that cats are way more evolved than us.
Yeah.
Way superior beings. Far superior beings. We like cats. How is Scaramanga?
He's very well. He's sleeping on the bed in the main bedroom.
Excellent.
He's curled up there. So
living the life of Riley. As cats.
Yeah, living the life of Scaramanga, which is pretty good deal. I don't know how he got that job. I often asked him, but he's never told me.
Excellent. Now, there's one other thing I wanted us to we've sort of almost skirted alongside it. But if these beings are indeed from way, way, way off into the future, they've evolved physically beyond us, they've evolved mentally beyond us, they've evolved probably emotionally way beyond where we are, and of course technologically as well. Although there are some theories that the technological and mental are perhaps more intertwined than we might realise. But that's a whole other subject. But how would they... What would they think of us right now? What would they think of our society?
I would imagine they'd be very concerned. You know, we are... If they cared about us... if they didn't care about us, they'd probably just be sat there saying, well, you've got to come and see this, it's all kicking off. But if they cared about us, they're probably thinking, oh my God, we've got a war in Europe, we've got a threatened war in China with China. We've got people starving to death, people freezing to death, more refugees than there have ever been at any time in human history. I imagine they're... And a small group... one question that came up was if we decided we're going to have an economic system that would enrich, that enable a few thousand people to have vast resources, have more money than they could spend in 100 lifetimes or 1,000 lifetimes, while the rest of the planet, billions of people, starve and freeze and their basic needs aren't met, and at the same time we're going to destroy the ecology of our planet. If we decided to do that, what would we be doing differently to what we're doing now? That's a critique of, I guess, late stage capitalism, but or is it late stage? As Frankie Boyle said, maybe this isn't the end of anything. This is apart from it's the end of the good old days. This is the start of a whole new dystopia.
Well, I'm going to dispute the. I agree with you on the capitalism, of course, but I'm going to disagree with you that they would be concerned, because if they've come from that far into the future, it works out. It must work out because they've made it to that point. If
they are us in the future, and they've come back basically for a history lesson to say, look, this is how close we came to not existing.
Or this is what it took for us to evolve.
Yeah. This is what we had to get past in order to move on to the next stage. The age of Aquarius.
I think they'd be curious about it and how were people living? What was the thoughts of the everyday person while all this was going on around them, I think it would be... I think they'd be curious. I don't think, like you say, if they cared about... I don't think they would care about us as individuals, because any more than, if you were to hop in a time machine and go back and see some serf struggling in a medieval environment, well, as a person with empathy, you might feel something, but I don't think you'd be, oh God, I wonder if this is going to affect, like, the way they're treating the serfs and that, the way they're treating the peasants. Is that going to stop the future? Well, no, because you've come from the future, so it doesn't.
And maybe it depends on your mindset as well. I'm thinking, for instance, if you watch a war film, there are some war films that people will go and watch, and it'll make them think, wow, that's great, I'm going to join the military. Apparently Top Gun, the American military was quite a moribund state after Vietnam. But then in the mid-'80s, this film Top Gun came out, which boosted recruitment so much that apparently the military was setting up recruitment stands in cinemas. So as the end credits are coming up, you could go and enlist. And because they made the sequel now, the sequel was it Days of Thunder or something, but they've made a sequel to Top Gun.
Now, Days of Thunder was a different movie entirely.
Yeah, but it was seen at the time as the sequel to Top Gun. As it's the same thing, but with cars. Yeah, it's the same. So but now they made Top Gun
movie.
Yeah, it's Tom Cruise's next movie. Oh, this is the sequel to Top Gun. It's just.
But then Tom Cruise
same movie with cars.
Always plays the same character. Except for Legend.
And Tropic Thunder, which was his best performance ever.
I've not seen Tropic Thunder.
He plays the studio. He plays the studio head, and I didn't recognise him at first.
Right,
I didn't realise it was him. It's an astonishing performance.
Good acting.
That is a sign of good acting. Yeah, it's an astonishing. I'd highly recommend that. If you got a bit down on Tom Cruise, watch Tropic Thunder and prepare to have your jaw drop. It's quite incredible.
Take your advice on that, because I've never really rated him as an actor. I think he's there to look pretty, and that's about it. And especially after War of the Worlds, which was just fucking appalling.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm with you on all that. But Tropic Thunder, it's pretty much a cameo role, but it is so good. He's the best thing in it.
Okay.
In the same way that... Yeah. I also think that the way we view extraterrestrials, I mean, we talk about the way they view us, but possibly the way we view them is, we project, we make our own assumptions, and we view them based on the knowledge that we have. That we are inclined to think of them as possibly hostile, possibly come to invade us, because that's what we would do. And in the same way, in ages past, we would have seen them as fairies or hobgoblins or angels, because that would be the understanding at the time.
Absolutely, but no, I think you've hit the nail on the head, very much, because it's very much human nature. I see people getting aggressive, like when I go on Twitter. Something I shouldn't do, really, but I go on Twitter and I'll make comments about COVID still being around, and people get ever so angry with me, and it's like, but you're treating me like I'm the bad guy, like I'm, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, I'm off on a tangent. But yes, people will treat others the way they would act towards them themselves. Is what I'm driving at.
But to end on a positive message, one corollary, conclusion I've drawn from this idea that we are insubstantial, we are energy vibrating at a certain frequency, that time isn't linear, that that's just how we experience it, is that we never die. There's no such thing as death, because we're just imagining ourselves.
Well, we know that, there's our physical bodies, there's our physical brains. We know that what actually makes the brain work is electricity flowing through the brain, possibly some other energies that we aren't aware of yet, but electricity is the one that we can definitely. And we know that at the point of death, there is an electrical discharge from the body. We know that.
Was it 11 grams or something of weight you lose when you die?
Okay, that I didn't know, but electricity doesn't weigh anything, so I'm not sure.
But ultimately, that's all we're made of. We're made of atoms, which are largely empty space and just energy.
Yeah,
very little actual matter.
But yes, where does that electrical discharge go?
Do we just experience our lives again in maybe a different version of it, or do we? Whatever.
Well, I personally don't believe in an afterlife. I think this is it. I think this is our one shot to A, be happy, and B, to make others around us happy and to make the world a better place. So make the most of it, listeners. That's what I say. Anyway, in fact, we've hit that time when I'm going to ask you, listeners. So, in fact, no, I'll ask you. Do you know, I don't need to ask you, because you said right at the very beginning, yes. These UFOs,
and I stand by that. You haven't changed my mind on that.
No, absolutely, and not what I want to. I think that's I'm open to the idea that they might be. I have a lot of questions. I look at people experience different types of extraterrestrial. If it was just one type of extraterrestrial and that was it, I'd be more open to the idea. I'm open to the idea that that's an explanation of perhaps some UFOs. But I think there are others as well. And I wouldn't rule out extraterrestrial visitation, personally.
That some distant civilizations have worked out how to actually travel a physical distance of billions of light years.
Yeah. Maybe time travel's involved in that. Maybe that's part and parcel of the equation of how to travel these massive distances, is not only do you fling your ship at the speed of light or beyond the speed of light, but you also go back in time so the journey doesn't take as long.
Yeah.
Who knows? Who knows?
Well, we don't.
The aliens do.
Yeah,
they know. But they're not telling us quite yet. But what do you think, listeners, is Michelle's question? And thank you so much for the question, Michelle. It's been one I've been really keen to talk about for some time. Sorry it's taken so long for us to get around to it. But yeah, what do you think, listeners? Are UFOs, extraterrestrials, are they us from the future come back to study us? Or are they absolutely, definitely from other planets? Do let us know what you think via the usual means. You can email us, aliensexplored@gmail.com. You can contact us through Facebook or Twitter by searching Aliens Explored. And, of course, all the links are in the description. And if you are one of our Patreon members, you get to access our exclusive Patreon Discord server where you can speculate with the best of them out there and give your opinions and theories on there. We would love to hear, however you contact us, we'd love to hear from you. Join us next time, though. When speaking about going back in time, Neil, we're going to be revisiting something we discussed in our second episode. Back in 31st of July 2020 is when we launched the podcast. Our second episode, we discussed the Phoenix Lights, and we're going to be revisiting that, particularly from the point of view of Governor Symington and his involvement. So you don't want to miss that one. In the meantime, keep watching those time dilation effects and keep watching your sat nav. And of course, keep watching the skies.
And keep watching your perception as well.
Yes.
Catch you next time.
And don't keep watching that part because it will never work. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Aliens Explored is a Fiegel Films production in association with Juicy Fomes. Music by Darren Mafucci and editing by Stu Jackson. Find us on Twitter and Facebook by searching Aliens Explored or visit aliensexplored.com.